What is up, folks? How's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. And for the past few weeks, I've been testing out the new Google Pixel 3a XL. Now, in a lot of ways, this is probably the best smartphone you're going to get for the dollar right now, at around $480 for the XL version, at about under $400 for the standard 3a Pixel. Now, if you're interested in these new smartphones, there are a couple of major questions that you need to ask. One is, what are the key differences between the 3a and the previous generation Pixel 3, which we're going to discuss because these are essentially scaled down versions of the Pixel 3 that got released just a few months back. And we're also going to do a comparison between the most popular and value-oriented iPhone that you're going to get right now, the iPhone XR. Now, before we begin, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, esrgear.com. We've been recently testing out their Lift wireless charging stand. This is a Qi fast wireless charging stand that's compatible with up to 10 watts wireless charging on Samsung products and up to 7.5 watts on the iPhone. Now, there's a couple of cool things about the stand that I really like. First and foremost, the design is really sleek, minimalistic. It's going to fit perfectly on pretty much anybody's desktop setup. You can charge your smartphone in both a horizontal and landscape mode, and it's also on sale for under $19, which is pretty darn affordable. Another handy thing that I've been using from esrgear.com is their braided lightning to USB-C cable. This is pretty handy in a lot of different ways. Firstly, for me, since I'm carrying an iOS device and an Android device, I can do a couple of different things with this cable. I can charge my iOS device connected to the Pixel 3a, which is really handy and convenient. On top of that, I've been transferring a lot of data back and forth between the two with this cable. And plus, if I want to sync up my iPhone with my USB-C enabled PC, laptop, I can also do so. This is definitely a must-have cable if you have an iOS device, and again, super cheap and affordable as well. Check out the links in the description for more details. And plus, if you're interested in cases for the new Pixel 3a XL, ESR Gear is going to have those in stock very, very soon as well. Again, a big thank you to esrgear.com for making this video possible. And now getting back to the comparison at hand, the new Pixel 3a, as you can see, doesn't have the camera bump that the original Pixel 3 did. I think that definitely looks a lot better. Even though we have thicker bezels, the design flow is a lot more aesthetically pleasing, symmetrical, and the whole camera bump idea introduced with the iPhones was kind of a bad aesthetic anyways, and I'm glad we're moving into different directions with smartphone designs. Now, from a dimensional standpoint, the Pixel 3a has a 6-inch display versus we have 6.1-inch display on the iPhone XR, and the iPhone XR has a slightly smaller footprint. It's a little bit slimmer profile in terms of its bezels as a result of the Pixel 3a XL's design. Now, the key thing that you're also going to notice with the 3a compared to the iPhone and indeed the previous generation Pixel 3 is that the build quality is subpar. It still feels relatively nice in the hand, but it's polycarbonate construction, a plastic shell, versus both the iPhone XR and the 3 were aluminum chassis and they had glass front to back. They were also water and dust resistance with official IP68 certification on the Pixel 3 and IP67 certification on the iPhone XR, versus we do not have those certifications on the 3a, so you definitely want to be a little bit careful with it around water. And in terms of the actual glass, is using Asahi Dragon Trail glass, which is probably a little bit cheaper to make than Corning Gorilla Glass 5 or 6 that the previous generation Pixel used, but hopefully it's going to be as scratch resistant and as shatter resistant. It is fairly good in bending the glass, but only a long-term usage will see how resilient this glass is on the 3a. Now, thankfully, I think the display hasn't been really compromised all that much. It's still using very similar OLED technology as the previous generation Pixel, and the black levels and brightness and color contrast look awesome. A very, very nice display. Has a fairly decent resolution too, about 2160 by 1080, giving it a PPI count that's actually higher than the iPhone XR, about 402 versus about 326 on the iPhone XR. And I think the display quality generally, certainly the black levels, are going to be a lot better than the IPS LCD type display that we have on the iPhone XR. Now, that being said, the 3a XL is still a slightly scaled down version of the Pixel 3 XL, which had a slightly larger display of 6.3 inches and a higher native resolution of 2160 by 1440 with a PPI count about 523. But beyond that notion, I think probably one of the biggest downsides of the Pixel 3a and the 3A XL definitely has to be its internal performance, and it's using a fairly dated Snapdragon 670 processor that is significantly slower than the previous generation Pixel 3's Snapdragon 845 chip, and definitely a lot slower than the A12 Bionic that Apple powers the iPhone XR with. As you can see on the Geekbench benchmark, we're only getting around 1,600 points on the single core score and about 5,100 points on the multi-core score, versus we're getting well over double those figures on the iPhone. And even the previous generation Pixel 3 XL performed a lot better in the single core and multi-core performance than the 3A as we have over here. Now, additionally, if you take a look at the Antutu benchmark, we're also getting double the performance figures on the iPhone, getting well over 300,000 points versus about 158,000 points on the 3A. Now, in real life, do these performance figures actually compromise the overall user experience for most people's needs? I would say no. If you're just browsing the web, watching YouTube videos, doing single things at a time, definitely not a big deal using the 3A as a daily driver. But if you're a hardcore multitasker, use a lot of different applications on your smartphone, and it's beginning to replace your mobile laptop device and things like that, I could definitely find situations where the 3A could be a little bit limiting, especially if you want the fastest, latest, greatest smartphone. But keep in mind that this is a budget-oriented smartphone, and the biggest compromise that you're going to probably pay with this budget smartphone is going to be the internal performance. Now, the one thing that you're not going to sacrifice whatsoever is the stellar camera performance. Now, more than anything else, I think the Pixel 3 has probably the most advanced digital image signal processor available on any smartphone. Its ability to resolve details, color, and indeed low light performance is pretty much unmatched by any other smartphone out there. And it's not so much the sensor technology itself. In fact, the sensor is pretty much identical to the previous generation Pixel 3, which is definitely a good thing. So we have the same 12 megapixel sensor with a maximum aperture of f1.8, about 28 millimeters wide, and there's no other cameras for different viewpoints or anything like that. Similar to the iPhone XR, which also has 12 megapixels. It's a little bit wider field of view, 26 millimeters, and has the same maximum aperture. Both have optical stabilization, and both have phase detection autofocusing. Both can also do 4K video at 30 FPS on the Pixel 3a versus 60 FPS on the iPhone XR. And the iPhone XR has better slow motion capabilities at 1080p up to 240 frames per second, versus we're limited to about 120 frames per second on the 1080p slow motion capabilities on the Pixel 3a. The front-facing camera is also pretty similar as well, 8 megapixels versus 7 megapixels on the cameras, and both have 1080p, but the iPhone can do 60 frames per second on the front side versus we're looking at 30 FPS. Now, in real life, when you're taking a look at images side by side, in pretty much every scenario you're going to get, the Pixel 3a is going to resolve better details. The colors are going to look a lot more accurate and vibrant depending upon what you're shooting, and it's always going to resolve in an amazing looking image on the Pixel 3a versus the iPhone just has a standard kind of modern day smartphone camera, which is definitely not bad. But when you take a look at the low light performance of what the 3a can do, coupled with its optical stabilization and predictive motion reduction technology, is pretty much astonishing, and something that you're never going to achieve in pretty much every other smartphone on the planet right now. Now, lastly, let's talk about the battery performance on the 3a XL, and there's a good thing about the battery performance and a bad thing. The only bad thing is the fact that it doesn't have wireless Qi charging like the previous generation Pixel 3 and indeed the iPhone, which is definitely a nuisance at the least, but it makes up for that lack of wireless charging for the fact that it has a larger capacity battery than the previous generation Pixel 3 with 3,700 milliamp hours. I believe the previous generation had about 3,430 milliamp hours, and definitely compared to the iPhone XR, which is sub 3,000 milliamp hour battery, you're going to get better battery performance overall in pretty much every scenario. Based on our synthetic benchmark results using the Geekbench battery benchmarking drain tool, we got a total runtime about 10 hours and 13 minutes on the Pixel 3a XL versus around 7 hours 22 minutes on the iPhone XR and the previous generation generation Pixel 3 XL got a runtime about 8 hours and 23 minutes. Now, we also do a video playback drain test where we just loop a video on infinity and airplane mode and just see how long these phones will last just playing a video. And based on the exact same scenario, the Pixel 3a XL got a total runtime about 16 hours and 26 minutes, which is pretty darn incredible. The previous generation Pixel 3 XL got a similar runtime, about 16 hours and 15 minutes, and the iPhone XR, which arguably has the best battery performance out of all of the iPhones, got a runtime about 15 hours and 34 minutes. Now, in conclusion, based on my experience thus far, I would definitely say that the Pixel 3a XL's benefits definitely outweigh its compromises. So certainly because it has a pretty awesome display, no camera bump, a cleaner overall aesthetic, and an awesome camera coupled with a fantastic battery life, as you guys saw, I think definitely outweigh the fact that it has a plastic body, no IP68 certification, a scaled down CPU and GPU performance, as well as lack of wireless charging. Couple that with the fact that it only cost under $480, definitely still makes this the best deal that you're going to find on a modern new smartphone. Now, there's certainly a lot of smartphones from different Chinese manufacturers that are on a scaled down budget, but I don't think that they're going to really compete with the overall display, the fit and finish, the general great battery life, and certainly never with the camera quality that you're going to get on the Pixel 3a and 3a XL. But really, other than that, guys, that's really it. Hopefully you like this video. If you have any specific questions, let me know. I want to give a big shout out to esrgear.com for sponsoring this video, for making all this stuff possible, and an even bigger thank you for you guys for supporting the channel and watching our content. Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already, and make sure you have post notifications turned on so that way you can get our videos once they become available. And thanks again. Take care.